being around that man, Sean Puffy Combs, I don't sleep to this day. I have a problem sleeping to this day. Like, yo, man, I'm here to work, man. I ain't sang in a week. I mean, I'm 13 years old, and I'm telling him, look, you're going to put me in the studio, man. You got Biggie Smalls in there. You got Craig Mack in there. I'm not here to party with you. I don't want to go to the clubs. Matter of fact, I'm too young to even be in here.
What if I told you that behind the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, young stars like Usher and Justin Bieber were thrown into a world so dark, it nearly destroyed them? Stay with me, because the truth you're about to hear will change the way you look at the music industry forever. Some of the world's most celebrated musicians have had their reputations shaken by unsettling truths, exposing the extremes people may endure in chasing wealth and recognition. Usher's story, in particular, is often pointed to as a striking example of how young performers can be thrust into challenging circumstances, experiences that leave deep marks long after the spotlight fades. Accounts from his early development, especially during his time in industry-run programs, shed light on the darker side of entertainment culture. Too often, ambition takes precedence over well-being, creating relentless cycles of pressure that still shape the journeys of new artists today. These stories serve as more than cautionary tales. They are reminders of how vital it is to protect young talent and to question the hidden price behind fame.
What they say, because they tried to push me out. They didn't want me in. They would actually say, you know, you're too close to the project. No, I'm not. Because remember, Usher went to stay with Puffy. Now that was a business decision right there, because I didn't know Puffy. I didn't know him.
How old was he?
Usher was 15. He lost his voice.
Physically or just?
You know, puberty. He's growing and he lost his voice. So he lost his range. So the record company felt like, okay, this is not a great investment. So Puffy was there, and I will never forget it. We had this conversation and he said, you're going to have to trust me. That was really, really a hard.
Usher's journey into music began early, nurtured by the steady guidance of his mother. His first breakthrough came when L.A. Reid, who would later discover Justin Bieber, recognized his talent and offered him a record deal. But not long after, Usher hit a devastating roadblock. He temporarily lost his voice. In that vulnerable period, fate introduced him and his mother to Diddy, who stepped in with the promise of mentorship. He even proposed that Usher move in with him so he could more directly shape the teenager's career. The decision raised eyebrows. For many, the idea of a young boy living away from home with little oversight seemed troubling. Yet, with her focus fixed on ensuring her son's future in music, Usher's mother agreed. That choice would go on to spark debates about how much risk and sacrifice young artists are expected to endure in the pursuit of stardom. Adding to these concerns were rumors of a disturbing incident during Usher's stay with Diddy. Reports surfaced suggesting that the young singer may have required hospitalization after an undisclosed situation. Industry insiders claim to have heard whispers of a child under Diddy's supervision needing medical care. Though the details were never confirmed, the speculation only deepened existing worries about the safety and well-being of minors navigating the unforgiving world of entertainment.
New York City. And I lived with Sean Puffy Combs for a year.
That's the crazy thing. Now, that was L.A. Reid's idea, right? We're sending you over to something called Puffy Flavor Camp.
There you go.
To learn
Flavor Camp?
Yeah,
Flavor
that's
Camp.
what it was called. And you're going to go to Puff Daddy's. He's
In the 90s. Do you understand what that's like?
Puffy's place was like just filled with chicks and orgying like nonstop, right?
No, not really. I
Come
mean,
on.
but there, hey, it was curious. I got a chance to see some things.
Yeah, but you were 13. What were you
I
seeing?
went there to see the lifestyle.
Right.
And I saw it. And it was, but I don't know if I could indulge and understand what I was even looking at. It was pretty wild.
So nobody tried to, some woman didn't come along.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I didn't say that. What I did say is that there were very curious things taking place. And I didn't necessarily understand it.
Biggie Smalls was there.
Biggie Smalls was there. Lil' Kim, Craig Mack.
All these people are hanging around.
Yeah, man. Faith Evans.
your parents
Jodeci,
were
Mary
okay?
J. Blige. They ain't know nothing about this shit.
Oh.
I was having a good time. You know what I mean?
Does he have you doing any chores? Are you doing dishes at all? I mean, to keep you humble somewhat, or are you just like, can you stay up till 4 a.m. with them and party?
I mean, I could. I actually stayed up longer than them.
And do you have money? What's going on?
I mean, I had like per diem. I had like,
What
like
a
a living.
life.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
14 years old. You're a dad now. Would you ever send your kid to Puffy camp?
Usher's ties to Sean Diddy Combs have remained one of the most debated aspects of his rise to fame, not only because of the mentorship and industry connections it provided, but because of the unsettling questions it continues to raise decades later about how young artists are treated when they are placed in environments that blur the line between opportunity and exploitation. In resurfaced clips, Diddy himself makes strange and provocative remarks about Usher living with him during his teenage years at what he referred to as Flavor Camp, even going so far as to joke about them waking up together. And while these comments were delivered in a seemingly playful, offhand way, the weight of such statements cannot be dismissed lightly because they shine a light on the strange circumstances in which a vulnerable adolescent was placed under the supervision of one of the most powerful figures in hip-hop, without the safety nets or oversight one would reasonably expect. For critics, this was not merely a case of Diddy being eccentric or outrageous for entertainment's sake, but rather an example of the entertainment industry's long history of normalizing questionable behavior when it comes to child stars, brushing aside valid concerns in the name of grooming the next big name, and treating the lack of boundaries as if it were simply part of the culture. When examined closely, the situation becomes emblematic of the broader problem of how mentorship in the music business has too often functioned without accountability, where the allure of access, fame, and opportunity eclipses the duty of care owed to impressionable teenagers. Usher, at that time, was not yet the confident superstar the world would come to know. He was still a boy navigating early adolescence, dealing with insecurities, the sudden pressures of expectation, and the enormous weight of a dream that had been placed on his shoulders. And instead of being sheltered in an environment designed to nurture his talent safely, he was thrust into a world defined by adult lifestyles, temptations, and blurred power dynamics that no teenager should have to negotiate. The fact that jokes about waking up together could be made so casually in public interviews speaks volumes about the lack of sensitivity toward these dynamics and, even more troubling, about the way the industry conditioned audiences to overlook red flags that should have been obvious. Fans laughed at the remarks, interviewers moved past them, and insiders rarely questioned the wisdom of sending a teenage boy into an adult environment, highlighting not only a failure of individual responsibility, but a systemic failure that prioritized grooming stars for profit rather than protecting them from harm. This is why the clip continues to circulate and resurface, not just as a curiosity from the past, but as a cultural artifact that forces uncomfortable questions. Why were stronger safeguards not in place? Why was parental oversight so limited in these arrangements? Why was the industry so willing to normalize what, in any other context, would be recognized as inappropriate? To understand the gravity, it helps to compare this to how child actors or athletes are treated in other high-pressure industries. Many of them, despite still facing risks, at least benefit from formal guardianship structures, mandatory welfare workers on sets, or legal protections that dictate hours and environments. Whereas in music, particularly in hip-hop and pop, young performers have often been launched into adult spaces with no equivalent safety nets. Usher's situation illustrates that gap with painful clarity, because while his career undeniably benefited from proximity to powerful mentors like Diddy, it also exposed him to risks and narratives that continue to cast a shadow over his legacy. Psychologists who study child fame often note that early exposure to adult dynamics can leave lasting psychological scars, creating lifelong struggles with trust, self-image, and boundaries. And looking at Usher's later interviews and the paths of artists like Justin Bieber, whom Usher himself mentored in similarly questionable circumstances, it becomes clear that these cycles repeat because the industry refuses to fully reckon with its past. The conversation around the Flavor Camp remark, then, is not just about one clip or one relationship, but about what it symbolizes: a culture of silence, normalization, and complicity that has defined how young artists are pushed into the spotlight. By treating the incident as a mere anecdote rather than as a warning sign, the entertainment machine essentially communicated that the success of the star was more valuable than the safety of the child, and that calculus, repeated over and over, is why so many young performers, from Usher to Bieber to countless unnamed others, have endured trauma behind the curtain of fame. Usher's connection to Diddy, when scrutinized today, is therefore not only a personal history but also a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when ambition is allowed to outweigh protection, when boundaries are blurred in the name of mentorship, and when the public fails to hold powerful figures accountable for the environments they create around impressionable youth.
And people know that was around that in that time that Puff and Usher did have a situation. And that situation led Usher to the hospital. Now I let Usher explain that to y'all. I let Usher tell that story. But how dare you say a man that groomed you, you gonna give him a pass? Bruh, you know I know. Let me reframe you on something. Remember Usher? We was at the Swiss Hotel. Puff had Kim in the room. Had one of Keith Sweat's baby mothers in the big room outside the master bedroom. He came outside in his robe. She gave him a fellatio right there. His back was turned to me. She gave him a fellatio. You knocked on the door. I came and opened the door for you. Puff went in the room. You came in the room and kissed that girl dead in her mouth. Now I'm telling that because you taking up for somebody that you know and a lot of more people know didn't do you right.
In 2012, Usher found himself at the center of public controversy when legal disputes surfaced, bringing accusations of personal misconduct to light. Court records revealed that the cases ended in settlements exceeding $1 million. The revelations not only drew headlines, but also reopened broader conversations about the heavy toll fame can take on young stars. For many, Usher's situation highlighted the long shadow cast by growing up in the spotlight, where early exposure, limited protection, and inadequate guidance often leave artists vulnerable to missteps with lasting consequences.
Asking, because I know the topic is sensitive. What happened to Usher?
I heard about some music executive from the industry back in Harlem. You know, I heard it from some music executives back in Harlem. And I'm not going to speak on their name. They doing programs and everything like that, and they may be doing something, they may speak on it themselves. But I heard it from some music executives.
What did you hear?
Bro, you know how people be talking, and we was around some people, something like that, and then some people might say, yo, I don't F with that dude. And at the time, I didn't even know who the F Usher was. You know what I'm saying? It was one of those type of situations. And when people say, yo, man, I don't F with them niggas, man, I'm getting out that industry and everything like that. You know, Puff sent this little kid to the hospital. How he sent her to the hospital? Man, nigga was bleeding from the butt. And that's what was said. I didn't even have a name for the kid at the time. Then you heard?
Usher has chosen to keep his sexuality private, a decision that remains entirely his own. What has captured public curiosity instead is his repeated association with high-profile figures who have carried controversies of their own. One example came when actor Orlando Brown made sensational claims involving both Usher and Diddy, statements that, while unverified, added yet another layer of speculation to the many narratives surrounding Usher's formative years in the spotlight.
Come here, don't sit on the bed at night. No homo. No, just don't get close to the bed. Don't get close. But it's just like, yo, we want to thank you for hosting the thing, man. It's been a pleasure. You didn't have to do it, and you did.
No, I definitely didn't have to do it. I definitely didn't have to. First and foremost, I'm not getting in the bed. Shout out to him and what he did. I'm just gonna, if we can, let's just put the camera a little this way, just so we're not. I don't want my shot to even I don't want it to come close to the bed at all. Usher look like he fresh off a goddamn plane. Usher
Fresh off the garden stage. That's my brother right here from day one. We used to wake up and, pause, but like that's how. Back in the days when he was like 10 and I was a little bit older, his older brother, we used to fight over the Frosted Flakes. You know what I'm saying? Before pause was invented. You know what I'm saying? But it's my brother for real. We used to actually wrestle off of the Frosted Flakes because he used to always.
Years later, Usher found himself on the other side of the industry dynamic, this time as a mentor. In 2008, when a 13-year-old Justin Bieber was signed by L.A. Reid, Usher stepped in to help shape the young star's path. Yet, in an unsettling echo of his own past, Bieber soon found himself introduced to some of the same influential figures who had once guided Usher, including Diddy. Reports suggested that Bieber even spent extended periods under Diddy's supervision without the presence of his parents. The revelations reignited serious concerns about why such an environment was considered acceptable for a child performer. For many observers, the parallels between Usher's early struggles and Bieber's situation raised an uncomfortable question. Was the industry repeating the same mistakes with a new generation of talent?
Usher, they were obtained by Radar Online, and apparently back in 2009 or 2010, he had contracted herpes and passed it on to a celebrity stylist having unprotected sex with her. He had to pay $1.1 million to that woman for severe emotional distress, and he also covered her medical bills. That case was settled back in 2012. Now, allegedly, there was a greenish discharge from his penis.
Whoa, that's a booger. Your penis boogers? I didn't know that.
He said he went to the doctor. He was cleared of any STDs, so the woman went on and continued. Now, if I notice a greenish discharge oozing out of your penis,
this ain't Nickelodeon.
I don't know that I would
That ain't
continue.
slime. What you gonna say? I know all these kids playing with slime nowadays, but no.
I don't care who you are, okay?
Nothing green supposed to be coming out your penis.
Nah, not at all.
That's not how this works.
Nope.
Yellow comes out.
In later interviews and podcast appearances, Usher's comments about Justin Bieber left many listeners uneasy. Some felt the discussions crossed lines, especially considering Bieber's age when he first entered the industry. The way sensitive topics were addressed so casually raised broader concerns about how young performers are treated and the lack of safeguards meant to protect them. What troubled observers even more were reports that Usher, at one point, had temporary guardianship of Bieber before introducing him to Diddy, despite prior concerns surrounding Diddy's supervision of young artists. Industry chatter pointed to this decision as a troubling repeat of history, questioning why a child star was again placed in such a vulnerable position. Some even went so far as to suggest that Diddy's involvement appeared predatory, casting a darker light on the choices made in shaping Bieber's early career. Usher himself later described the moment he discovered Bieber's talent. At the time, Bieber was just an unknown kid eager to sing for anyone willing to listen. Usher recalled being encouraged by those around him, including L.A. Reid's then-wife, to meet the young performer immediately after seeing a video of him. That introduction would eventually change Bieber's life, propelling him into global stardom. But with fame came pressure, exploitation, and a spotlight that grew too intense too quickly. In a recent Apple Music interview, Bieber became emotional as he reflected on how those years affected him. Fighting back tears, he admitted that at his lowest points he was on a path of self-destruction and doubted whether he would survive. He spoke candidly about living with shame, the weight of constant expectations, and how being celebrated so intensely at such a young age left him vulnerable. Now older, Bieber says his greatest hope is to use his story as a cautionary example to help protect today's young artists from facing the same hardships. "I don't want anyone to go through what I went through," he explained, emphasizing the importance of mentorship, accountability, and compassion in an industry that too often takes advantage of youth. Through his testimony, Bieber underscored a truth that resonates far beyond music. Early fame may bring glory, but without protection, it can also leave scars that last a lifetime.
So just show you this montage. This is a montage that was shared by Evie Magazine. They do great work on their TikTok of Justin Bieber, again, just 15 years old, in Hollywood, surrounded by a bunch of adults. And you let me know if any of this registers to you as normal. Take a listen.
Wow! I feel violated right now. Wow.
Lean into me again. You smell amazing. How old are you?
Thank you.
How old are you?
I'm 16. I'll be 17 in like 2 weeks.
I don't ever remember smelling that good at 16. Like that was bad.
Yeah.
Wow, look at your eyes.
For many fans, Usher's role in Justin Bieber's early career remains complicated. While his mentorship helped launch Bieber into global stardom, the experience also left behind emotional wounds that Bieber himself later acknowledged. Over time, the strain between the two became more visible. At one point, Bieber unfollowed Usher on social media and even declined to share the stage with him during a high-profile Super Bowl performance. These quiet but deliberate choices reflected more than simple disagreements. They pointed to the lasting impact of Bieber's early struggles and his ongoing effort to heal from the pressures of a childhood spent under the glare of fame.
Comes up to you. He's not Justin Bieber yet. He's just some kid. And he says, I want to sing for you.
It was at the studio of Jermaine Dupri's. I said, why don't you set up a meeting between me and your manager? I'd love to meet with you and do this in a formal setting. I'm late for an appointment with Jermaine Dupri.
Right.
And I don't want to keep him waiting. Let's just do this the right way.
And then you have him come to audition for you, right?
Actually, there were a few people. My wife at the time.
Right.
It also was Perry Reed, L.A. Reid's first wife.
So you were all sitting in a room somewhere?
We were in a room.
Yeah.
And I showed her the video. And Perry says, are you crazy? You better get down there and meet this kid right now. He's amazing.
When all these pics come out and all this stuff with Bieber's big penis, are you the mastermind behind that? Say, listen, show off your big penis when people come to those concerts. Or are you sitting there?
Is that the kind of managing he's doing?
Usher, are you sitting down with him and saying, yeah, show your or leave it in your pants? I mean, do you sit him down and say, look, part of this is PR, man.
By the way, he does have a brain of his own.
Yeah, but were you shocked at the size of his penis?
Hey, listen, he has a mind of his own. What he chose to do with his penis is his prerogative. He's managing that aspect of his life. But
it wasn't only the powerful figures in the music industry who failed Justin Bieber during his most formative years. The absence of meaningful protection extended even to his own family, who should have been his first and strongest line of defense. As a teenager thrust into the public eye, Justin faced immense pressures that would have been overwhelming for any adult, let alone a child still trying to understand himself and his place in the world. Yet rather than being given the space to grow under the watchful care of responsible guardians, he was left largely exposed to an environment that prioritized image, profit, and relentless momentum over his emotional well-being. His parents, though physically present at times, often played the role of bystanders rather than protectors, and critics have argued that they seemed more eager to benefit from his sudden rise than to shield him from the darker realities of global stardom. Troubling moments, instances where Justin's behavior clearly reflected a young boy in crisis, were brushed off by those closest to him or reframed as part of his rebellious persona, a marketing angle rather than a cry for help. When he lashed out at paparazzi, experimented publicly with substances, or showed visible signs of exhaustion, these should have served as red flags, signals that their child was buckling under the weight of a machine too big for him to control. Yet rather than stepping in with empathy and guidance, his parents and handlers often allowed the spectacle to continue, either dismissing it outright or packaging it as entertainment. The media, feeding off every stumble, amplified his struggles into global headlines, while fans alternated between laughing at his mistakes and condemning him for them, rarely pausing to consider that behind the celebrity status was an adolescent boy whose brain and heart were still developing. This culture of dismissal had devastating consequences. Instead of receiving the grounding influence of family stability, Justin grew up surrounded by a circle that seemed more interested in shaping his image than safeguarding his humanity, a cycle that left him without the compassion, boundaries, and structure every young person needs. In hindsight, it is painfully clear that Justin wasn't simply a superstar in the making, but a vulnerable child in desperate need of love, patience, and balance. things he often had to search for in places that could not truly provide them. Scholars who study child celebrity have long pointed out how fame accelerates adulthood artificially, forcing kids to deal with pressures like financial management, brand responsibility, and public scrutiny before they've even had a chance to form a stable identity. In Justin's case, this accelerated adulthood was compounded by the failings of those around him. His parents did not establish the consistent protection he needed, the industry prioritized his profitability over his personhood, and the media turned his vulnerabilities into punchlines. Each of these failures stacked on top of one another, leaving a boy isolated in a world that cheered his talent but ignored his pain. This pattern is tragically common in the entertainment industry, where parents sometimes lack the resources, maturity, or even the will to put their child's mental health above the promise of financial security or fame. For Justin, this meant that the very people who should have served as anchors in his stormiest moments were instead swept up in the tide of his celebrity, leaving him to drift through adolescence without the safeguards that might have spared him years of emotional turmoil. The result was a young man who grew up under a microscope, applauded when he conformed to the image of a teen idol but ridiculed and punished when he cracked under the pressure. In essence, he was set up to fail, not because he lacked talent or resilience, but because the structures meant to protect him, including his family, were either absent, complicit, or ill-equipped to handle the magnitude of his fame. Looking back now, the consequences of this neglect are obvious in the struggles he has openly spoken about: depression, substance abuse, and a profound sense of being lost at the height of his success. Each of these hardships can be traced back, at least in part, to the absence of consistent parental guidance and the normalization of his suffering as part of the show. This reality forces us to reconsider not only Justin's story, but the wider culture that allows young stars to be commodified so easily. His life reminds us that behind every viral headline or paparazzi photo of a celebrity meltdown, there is often a child who needed love but was handed exposure, who needed guidance but was given management, and who needed protection but was instead placed on stage, with the world watching. The tragedy is that Justin's parents, like many before them, had the opportunity to be different, to step away from the flashing lights and ensure that their son's humanity was valued over his profitability, but instead they fell into the same cycle that has consumed countless other families of child stars. And so, Justin's adolescence became a cautionary tale, not of a boy gone wild, as the media gleefully portrayed, but of a boy let down by the very people who should have been his shield.